Hello and welcome back to Football Scrutiny. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first match from Ancelotti for his Everton home debut against Burnley. Let's get into it. On paper, Everton lined up with a 4-4-2, most notably using Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison as a strike partnership. Defensively, they stuck to the 4-4-2. In the defensive phase, we would see them rotate to use a back three and look to create a free man in midfield. Burnley lined up with their typical 4-4-2 system, and their formation changed depending on the amount of players which are up front for Everton. Offensively, they would then use the 4-4-2, often playing direct football. Let's get into a little bit more detail the structure of Everton's structural rotation from defence to attack. Everton looked to build their structure in transition and played on the break sparingly, probably due to the fact that Burnley were a direct playing team with a compact approach. So Everton shifted to a back three in attack. Holgate moved into the left half space, with Coleman moving into the right half space, with Mina sitting centrally in between the two. The system naturally then developed into a midfield double pivot, with Fabian Delph playing as the true holding midfielder while Sigurdsson dropped alongside him to form that double pivot. Sigurdsson, though, was more of the box-to-box player going forward, but in the midfield third, he held his position alongside Delph. Calvert-Lewin up front was tasked with stretching the Burnley defence, as was Richarlison. However, Richarlison was also given a job more of a number 10 and was a target when Everton played long balls under pressure, with Lewin running in behind looking for the flick-ons. By having both wide centre-backs playing in the half spaces, this gives them a better field of view and allows them to play more diagonal passes into that double pivot with Sigurdsson and Delph. The asymmetric midfield from Delph and Sigurdsson and Bernard looked to disrupt Burnley's shifting, and the width from the fullbacks emphasises the low density in the wide areas, with most of the players coming in that central channel. This formation from Everton forced Burnley to adjust theirs. Burnley, like we already mentioned, tried to keep at least one centre-back extra compared to the forwards at Everton at all times. But also they tried to prevent Everton playing out with three in defence, so they pushed one player forward to try and create numerical equality and prevent them from playing meaningful passes into midfield. The two central midfielders would then push onto the double pivot of Everton. Cork and Westford had to be mindful of Bernard between the lines, and one of the two may have to stagger themselves to create access to him to avoid Everton taking advantage of the numerical superiority in this area. So with this image now we can see that back three now from Burnley, the man-orientated midfield with the dual roles to prevent Bernard from getting free, so Westwood and Cork responsible for blocking passes coming into Bernard. The 3 against 3 with McNeil pushing forward to preventing Coleman from having superiority in the build-up. Playing with these three narrow made it difficult for Everton, especially in the first half, to make really meaningful progressive connections in midfield. As a result, Everton playing first line passes and circulating play without really progressing with control. This image clearly shows the build-up structure from Everton, with the three centre-backs now trying to play out using the width of the area. And we can also see the two in midfield, the two pivots, but we can also see the way that they counteract it. The three from Burnley going man-to-man with the centre-backs from Everton, and the two midfielders pushing up against the pivots, preventing passes coming inside the pitch, forcing the play out wide, preventing Everton from progressing. One important factor to highlight in the build-up play from Everton was they didn't often use their goalkeeper. They relied on the three centre-backs to play out. This gave them a disadvantage as there was less players further up the field from the ball. As no one went to pressure the goalkeeper, it was more difficult for them to play forward and easier for Burnley to prevent those passes coming inside. When Everton, though, did manage to circulate the ball successfully, there was often quite a lot of space between the lines for Bernard to receive due to the fact that Burnley were pushing 5 players into preventing that build-up play. This is another example of Everton's build-up shape and how it's matched by Burnley in the middle of the pitch. There we can see the 3 forwards lining up against the 3 centre-backs and the 2 midfielders jumping onto the 2 pivots. Everton looked to create numerical superiority in advanced areas. When Everton progressed out of their first phase of the build-up, they looked to create a free man, usually Richarlison in front of the centre-backs to try and progress. We can see that when they moved forward, the Everton midfield rotation, Delph would become the lone pivot in the centre of midfield and Sigurdsson would advance to a higher position, often in line with Bernard's position. Calvert-Lewin would try and pin the two centre-backs whilst Richarlison looked to take advantage of the space which the number 10 plays in. This then in turn forced the Burnley defence to revert back to their original two banks of four, with the two forwards trying to prevent passes coming inside. By having those two tight lines of four within the middle of the pitch, it made it difficult for Everton to progress. In these situations, the wide centre-backs need to be aggressive and get forward to try and create numerical superiority on the sides of the pitch. In this image we can see some of these things occurring. The back three from Everton, although Coleman is slightly further forward as he's just driven the ball forward, we can see the positions 8 and 10 from Coleman and Sigurdsson are now inside. Burnley are nice and tight in the midfield as well. The width coming from Everton's fullbacks, with the superiority in the middle of the pitch and few players in wide areas against Burnley's 2 in wide areas. This allowed the Burnley fullbacks to jump forwards without worrying about Everton players running in behind. This variation in shape mostly depends on two things. One, the height of their team structure, which depends on which third of the pitch they're in, and also the positioning of Bernard and Richarlison. Since Bernard was more narrow, Richarlison would check back wider, and when Bernard played more in the half space, Richarlison operated more in the centre. Moving on to the goal analysis, Everton scored with about 13 minutes left to play. This came just moments after Keane came on as a substitute. That substitute was made by coming on for Bernard. This tactical change was important because Keane is a different player to Bernard. Keane very much played more in an advanced role, as we can see here, moving forward. This put more emphasis on progressing through the wide area, which Everton put to Burnley's defence under more pressure. With three strikers now waiting for a cross from wide areas, the cross was put in, and that led to the first goal. This picture from the first half shows the two centre forwards and Benak, the attacking midfielder. There was more emphasis in the first half for trying to find a space between the lines rather than crossing into the box, and ultimately this tactical change from Ancelotti won them the match.